What is poppin' YouTube? Bringing you my sells at every position for Dynasty Fantasy Football. If you like Dynasty Fantasy Football content, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, and we are starting off with some sells at the wide receiver position. Now, I have divided these as like a hard sell and a soft sell, because let's be clear, with Dynasty, you got to have some strategy, so it kind of depends on your league, team, and format for each of these positions. And my first hard sell is going to be Chris Olave. Now, I hear you with Chris Olave. I'm an Ohio State Buckeye fan, so you're going to say, Caleb, why are you trying to hard sell on Chris Olave? He's only 23 years old. You're being a dummy. Don't be selling Chris Olave. Wide receiver 10 on Keep Trade Cut, 23 years old, will be 24 by the time the season starts. And if we look at his total seasons, 2 total seasons in the NFL, 14.5 fantasy points per game is what he put up this last year, 13.2 in his rookie season. Now, both of those metrics are great. The big concern with me is the fact that this team does not have a quarterback. Can they get a quarterback at some point to absolutely boost Chris Olave's value? I think so. But at this current moment, without us knowing that and knowing what he's got in the last 2 seasons where he's had 119 targets, 138 targets, it just doesn't make me excited about Chris Olave. When you got guys that you could trade in to like a Drake London who just got Kirk Cousins. You got Malik Neighbors coming into the NFL who's going to be a top 10 pick where you could re-roll out of Chris Olave. You could even go down if you're trying to compete and maybe get up to like an AJ Brown or Tyreek Hill on a competitive roster. And I think those are moves that I would be liking to do to get out from Chris Olave, to get either a better asset to help me compete right now and or to re-roll to get into a younger asset. And I know it's always risky getting into a guy like Malik Neighbors when we've seen Chris Olave have decent high-end wide receiver 2 stat on a year-to-year basis, but I'm just worried about Chris Olave. I'm worried about the situation. That's why I have him labeled here as a hard sell. My next hard sell is going to be Stephon Diggs for the Buffalo Bills. Now, Stephon Diggs most likely is on your team because you are a competitive team. You are headed towards that championship, but right now he's at wide receiver 31, 30 years old. And once these wide receivers hit that 30-year-old age cliff, I start to get really nervous about their overall dynasty value. I know Mike Evans, I know Devontae Adams. There's been some examples of guys that have had good 30-year seasons. I am just a little, like I said, still a little bit worried about Stephon Diggs because he's just a little bit smaller of a wide receiver, and the Buffalo Bills need wide receiver help. They signed Curtis Samuel in free agency. They are most likely going to be bringing in a rookie wide receiver because it's clear Stephon Diggs just wasn't getting it done this last year for the Buffalo Bills, where he was the wide receiver 13 on a points per game basis, 16.1 fantasy points per game. The year before that, 18.9. The year before that, 16.8. So he has been putting up very solid fantasy football points for you. I am just concerned that at the end of the day, he's getting older. And right now, as his value continues to kind of go down, what can we go trade out some Stephon Diggs for? Could I trade Stephon Diggs for the 108 and go get Brian Thomas Jr. in a super flex? I like that. Could I trade Stephon Diggs and maybe get into a Deebo Samuel, who's a little bit younger? I know there's currently some trade rumors with Deebo, but I would like that deal for you as a competitor. Could I trade out of Stephon Diggs and maybe tear down to get a Christian Kirk, a Calvin Ridley for a second added on top of that? Those are all moves that I'm willing to do with Stephon Diggs. I have him as a pretty hard sell because I think you need to be trying to get out of Stephon Diggs at this current moment. My next hard sell is going to be Cooper Kupp. And I know a lot of you are going to be upset about me because I've been maybe one of the biggest Cooper Kupp believers, truthers. I know, granted, he popped off, but I was in before that. I was trading for him that offseason. It absolutely worked out for me. But then we've kind of had 2 years where last year he was still a really high wide receiver 1, wide receiver 2 on a points per game basis. This last season gets absolutely injured. Puka Nacua steps up for the Rams and only finishes as a wide receiver 23 on a points per game basis. Still had 95 targets in 12 games, 59 receptions. So I'm not out here saying that Cooper Kupp can't age well, but he is 30 years old, will be 31 by the time the season starts. And a guy like him, when we're looking at him as wide receiver 39 on Keep Trade Cut. Now, I know end all be all, Keep Trade Cut isn't where we need to define and have our value. But guys, I think it is time to sell some Cooper Kupp. I mean, Puka Nacua is definitely the clear wide receiver 1. Kyron Williams stepped up as a running back out of the backfield. Will they bring in another wide receiver to add to that wide receiver core? Because I think Cooper Kupp, it's just, I'm worried about those ankles. I'm worried about those feet. I'm worried about those hamstrings. Chris Godwin. Would you rather have Chris Godwin right now or Cooper Kupp? I mean, if you could tell me that Cooper Kupp was going to play all next year, sure. Give me some Cooper Kupp. But I don't think so. So I'm probably going to be taking Chris Godwin. Could I trade out of Cooper Kupp to get into a Xavier Worthy? Are we talking like the 110, 111 range in a super flex? I like that. Could you trade Cooper Kupp to get into Deontay Johnson? Now that's an interesting one. I had him in my buy video yesterday. That is going to be all a matter of preference for you, but I think I might be taking some Deontay Johnson, and some of y'all are going to be telling me I'm a freaking idiot. Could you up to your Cooper Kupp into Christian Kirk, who now doesn't have to compete with Calvin Ridley? I think all of those are some deals that I would be looking looking to do if I'm either rebuilding and I have Cooper Kupp, or I'm trying to tear things down, or even if I'm contending just to get younger, because like we said, Cooper Kupp, if he has another massive injury-riddled season, we're going to be looking at Cooper Kupp and being a little bit worried about his overall value. Then we move to our next guy, and we got Jalen Waddle. And I think Jalen Waddle, I have him labeled as a soft sell. So like I said, Cooper Kupp, Stephon Diggs, that was hard sells. Jalen Waddle here is going to be a soft sell. And the reason that I have Jalen Waddle as a soft sell, wide receiver 13 on Keep Trade Cut. Now, pretty much any wide receiver between the back half of wide receiver 1 to pretty much middling wide receiver 2, there's a lot of arguments to be made, and you could probably be making about, oh, like I like this guy better, I'm going to tear off him. My big thing with Jalen Waddle is, of course, he was getting 2021 wide receiver 15, wide receiver 12 in 2022, and then this last year, only wide receiver 21 with Tyreek Hill, 14.2 fantasy points per game, had 104 targets, 72 receptions. I know Dolphins had a lot of issues. My man Notorious absolutely loves the Dolphins, so why are you all in on selling Jalen Waddle? I just think he's a soft sell right now, because I think his most upside is wide receiver 12. I mean, I don't see him cracking the top 10 of dynasty wide receivers. And at this point, if we realize that right now, before the NFL draft, before we know some of these landing spots, you could flip out of Jalen Waddle and get into a Rome Odunze. You could flip out of a Jalen Waddle and get into a Brandon Knight. You could flip out of a Jalen Waddle and potentially get into a guy like Michael Pittman Jr. if you need some stats this year in your competitive team. Now, I know what you're saying to me. You're saying, Caleb, a lot of those guys are behind Jalen Waddle on Keep Trade Cut. You might even be able to get a little bit of a piece thrown in, but I have Jalen Waddle as a soft sell. You hear me out. You let me know if you think Jalen Waddle should be a soft sell. My next hard sell is going to be DK Metcalf for the Seattle Seahawks. And right now on Keep Trade Cut, DK Metcalf is wide receiver 24. And I absolutely love DK Metcalf. I mean, the highlights, the touchdown machine that DK Metcalf is, but he is getting up there in age. He's 26 years old. So we are heading into the absolute prime of his career. And I don't know what you think about JSN, but Tyler Lockett just re-signed in this offense. In this last year, wide receiver 22 on a points per game basis. The year before that, wide receiver 24, wide receiver 20 before that. So DK Metcalf, honestly, with Geno Smith, it hasn't been good. And if we're valuing DK Metcalf as wide receiver 24, that feels pretty appropriate, but I'm just a little bit worried if JSN takes that next step this year with Tyler Lockett still getting some of those touches. What is that going to do for DK Metcalf? I know a lot of people just assume JSN is going to take that next step, which I'm a JSN truther. It's looking a little bleak, but even still, JSN with their new offensive coordinator likes to run a lot more wide receiver 3 sets, so they're all going to be on the field. JSN is going to be able to take a little bit more of the snap share, a little bit more of the target share, and what's that going to do for DK Metcalf? So if I can get out for DK Metcalf, if I can flip DK Metcalf and maybe a small bet to get up to a Tank Dell, to get up to a T. Higgins, absolutely love that. If I can trade down from DK Metcalf on Keep Trade Cut and get into a guy like Zach, get into a guy like JSN, even get into a guy like George Pickens. I know George Pickens right now is the clear wide receiver 1, so maybe you're not able to do that with the Pittsburgh Steelers and the Russell Wilson news. But I just have DK Metcalf as a pretty hard sell. We move on to our next guy. We're going to be talking about Scary Terry. And I know that Marcus Mariota is signed. We're assuming that Scary Terry and the Commanders are going to get early round quarterback in this draft. I just would like to get out of Scary Terry. He is getting up there in age. If you look at Keep Trade Cut right now, 28.5 years old, wide receiver 36 on a points per game basis. So get me out of some Scary Terry when you could flip him for a guy like Amari Cooper, Christian Kirk, Calvin Ridley. I like all those situations a little bit better. I know now this could all change if somehow Scary Terry gets traded into an organization like the Kansas City Chiefs, like the Buffalo Bills, where he's all of a sudden paired with an elite level quarterback. But at this current moment, Scary Terry is not paired with an elite level quarterback. So that is why I have him as a soft sell. My first running back sell is going to be Kenneth Walker. And I understand I've had him as a hard sell. I honestly been putting him as a sell in each and every league of mine. I've been trying to get him off my roster, and I understand a lot of people like some Kenneth Walker, but my thing is he's right now valued as RB12 on Keep Trade Cut, and he's never had a top 12 type season. I mean, when we're looking at guys around Kenneth Walker, give me JSN for Kenneth Walker. Give me a 25 mid first. Can I flip Kenneth Walker into a TJ Hawkinson or Dalton Kincaid if I'm tight in need? Could I even flip Kenneth Walker for Josh Jacobs in a small piece? Those are all deals that I'm willing to do for Kenneth Walker, and I have him as a really hard sell. Move to our next guy, and it's going to be Isaiah Pacheco, who honestly this year RB14 on a points per game basis. Right now, on Keep Trade Cut is the RB14. So if we're looking 2026 mid first, JJ McCarthy, Mike Evans, Stephon Diggs. I know we had Stephon Diggs as a sell earlier, but if I have Isaiah Pacheco and I can get Stephon Diggs, I almost prefer that. Or adding a small piece to get into a Rashad White. The Kansas City Chiefs, I know they didn't add a running back in free agency. I am just concerned about Isaiah Pacheco. He's 25 years old. This just feels a little bit too rich for my tasting, and that is why I have him as a hard sell. We then move to our next guy, and it's going to be James Cook. And James Cook is kind of in a similar situation to how I view and evaluate Isaiah Pacheco, where James Cook, RB12. So of course I do prefer James Cook over Isaiah Pacheco in a vacuum, but James Cook, who knows who the Buffalo Bills are going to add? You know, they were rumored to be going after some running backs because they know that that's part with Josh Allen in the backfield. That is absolutely dire, but we're looking at this team. They're going to be adding another wide receiver too. I knew they added Curtis Samuel. You got Stephon Diggs. You got Dalton Kincaid. They're probably going to add another receiving option, and I wouldn't be surprised if they try to add a running back in the draft this year. And if they're going to be adding a running back in the draft, or even just be adding some help alongside James Cook, RB12 right now, if something like that were to happen, it would absolutely crater his fantasy football value and his dynasty fantasy football value because he is 24.5 years old. I'm looking to get out. Can I trade James Cook for George Pickens? Can I get a late first? Can I trade him for Jaden Reed? Like, those are all deals that I'm looking to do in this sell area for James Cook. And then my final running back that I'd be looking to get out of is DeAndre Swift, who just signed a huge deal with the Chicago Bears. And that definitely gave DeAndre Swift a little bit of that good old value bump. Right now on Keep Trade Cut, he is RB16. And with him being RB16, you're still having to compete with Khalil Herbert and Roschon Johnson in that backfield. And I know DeAndre Swift looked good this year, but the biggest concern that I have with DeAndre Swift is kind of the fact that it started off really good and it did not end as hot as it started. And now you put him in a backfield that is a little bit more competitive than what he was dealing with the Eagles and a little bit worse of an offensive line. And you have me all the way out on DeAndre Swift. I mean, if I could flip DeAndre Swift for Javonte Williams, for Amari Cooper, for Terry McLaurin, I know I just bashed on Terry McLaurin, for Calvin Ridley, like all those deals I would be doing with DeAndre Swift in a heartbeat. Not saying that in some redraft leagues I won't have some shares of DeAndre Swift, but right now in this kind of vacuum, I am trading away DeAndre Swift. Now moving on to our quarterback sell. Anthony Richardson right now is QB9 on Keep Trade Cut, and with him being QB9, there are some guys around my boy Anthony Richardson that I would much rather have. Would you rather have Anthony Richardson and a small piece or Justin Herbert? Give me Justin Herbert. Some quarterbacks behind him, Caleb Williams. I don't know if you could actually trade Anthony Richardson for the 101 straight up, but if you could do that, get that to me. Do I prefer Jordan Love? Yes. Do I prefer Kyler Murray? And those guys are behind Anthony Richardson. Now, I know he dealt with some injuries. I know the big comparison is Cam Newton, but for me, I understand points per game wins out, and Anthony Richardson has that rushing Konami code upside. I just much prefer at this point. I think it's a little bit too high value. I think it's a little bit too high projection to be having Anthony Richardson that high. I think he's getting a little bit of that injury discount, that injury. We'll wait and see what you do in year two. Whereas I'm more prepared to kind of dip out right now and have Anthony Richardson as a soft sell. My next quarterback that I would be trying to sell is Trevor Lawrence, who right now is going off the board as QB12. Trevor Lawrence, QB12, QB13 finishes the last 2 years. I think we're kind of seeing the ceiling of what his fantasy football value could be. So I'm looking to get out of Trevor Lawrence. Could I trade him for Jaden Daniels? So he's valued right now around like the 103 to 105. Could I get that for Trevor Lawrence? Absolutely. If I could get that, get me out. Trade him for Dak Prescott in a small piece. Trade him for Drake May. Trade him for Tua. I also have Tua as a sell. So I think Tua, you should be looking to get out. I know there's rumors that he's going to get a big contract extension. He's 26 years old. The Miami Dolphins probably feel a little bit stuck, like they're too good to actually get somebody. It's going to be too expensive to trade him away, so maybe we can win with him. I just do not like the overall upside that we've seen from Tua and a fantasy points per game perspective. So if I can get Jared Goff or Kirk Cousins in a small piece attached for my Tua, those are deals that I would be looking to do. Because like I said, you play in 2 to 3 year windows, and as much as I would love for Tua to be an absolute dynamite dynasty quarterback, I just cannot do that in my good conscience and tell you to go get some Tua Tagovailoa. Now, moving on to my tight end sells, I'm providing 3 tight end sells for you. And my first tight end sell is going to be George Kittle, and I have him listed as a hard sell. Now, George Kittle honestly had himself a pretty good fantasy football season the last few years. This last year was tight end 6 on a points per game basis. The year before that was tight end 2. The year before that was tight end 4. And, you know, there was a while where a lot of people were assuming that George Kittle was going to be able to overtake and become the tight end 1. And he's just never been able to do that. A lot of it's due to just injuries. A lot of that is just due to the fact that his 49ers offense added Christian McCaffrey, Debo, Brandon Ayuk were able to step up. I have George Kittle as a pretty hard sell. I know there's the rumors that they're going to be getting rid of Debo. They're going to be getting rid of Brandon Ayuk. But if they do that, they're going to either be drafting, bringing in more weapons. And I know George Kittle can absolutely blow up. He can be the number 1, the number 2 receiving option in an offense. They love to see him block. And so it's hard for me to really, with him getting up there in age, to not see if I can try to get out of an asset like that. And you're probably going to say, well, Caleb, you probably were saying the same thing about Travis Kelce and you missed out on 5 years of production. I just think George Kittle's a little bit different with the situation than a guy like a Travis Kelce. But you do you, boo. Whatever you want to do. My next guy is going to be Michael Mayer. and they just brought in Gardner Minshew and Aiden McConnell to kind of determine who the starting tight end is going to be. Right now, Michael Mayer is the tight end 12 on Keep Trade Cut. Let me get out while I still can. Drafted him in the second round last year. And let's be clear, the tight end landscape, besides like the top 6 guys, it's kind of barren. So you're kind of hoping, what could I do with a guy like Michael Mayer? A guy like Evan Ingram, who is behind Michael Mayer, if you need tight end help, absolutely would love to flip Michael Mayer into an Evan Ingram, just due to the volume that Evan Ingram has been getting consistently and producing on a fantasy points per game basis. I'm just trying to sell. It's more of a soft sell. I did like him as a prospect coming out of Notre Dame, but I just think this value is a little bit too high. And my final tight end that I will be selling is going to be Cole Kmet. And we talked on stream a few days ago, me and Andrew, about Cole Kmet. We had actually a little bit of a debate about Cole Kmet, but right now, if I could look at Cole Kmet, he's right now going off the board as tight end 14, and that just feels a little bit too rich for my taste when I like guys like a Dalton Schultz, a Luka Musgrave, even Pat Frymuth with Russell Wilson a little bit more than Cole Kmet, who just got Gerald Everett added into that tight end room. And I know I can hear Andrew say points per game were great for Cole Kmet last year, Caleb. Getting a rookie quarterback, the rookie quarterback is going to be adding and throwing, they always want the security blanket for the tight end. Just hard for me when you know that this Bears offense hasn't been good. You add in a rookie quarterback, you got DJ Moore. They're probably going to draft another wide receiver or weapon. You still have Cole Kmet with Gerald Everett. You still got all these running backs in the backfield with DeAndre Swift. Makes me just a little bit nervous, and I could regret this take. Maybe Cole Kmet was not someone that you should be looking to sell, but I am looking to sell Cole Kmet currently at this time. So let me know down below what trade questions you have, who you're looking to sell. Hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, and I'll catch you on the next one. Peace.